after another, 6 years of graduate school, by the time I got to my postdoc, I felt like that was a good decision. That was the right decision.
Yeah, I'd like to probe you more on that. Last note is, can you talk to more about your PhD experience? Like, what I guess you mentioned it pretty honestly that doing a PhD wasn't your first plan, but it somehow was a part of your the circumstances you were in. I would rather say. So, going into the PhD experience, and if you were to see in retrospect, what are the things that, apart from research, I mean, you have a stellar profile in research, so I won't be talking more about your research as of now, but talking about the non-technical traits, like was there something you can reflect back on through your PhD that you learned or you grew into that you might have something to speak to?
Yeah, and I think that things like time management, self-motivation, being able to make connections with people that you work with remotely. All of those things were really important to me. But I can't give you like really good advice about how I did it. It's something that, in your own life, and also it's different for different disciplines. So it depends on what area of the world, what area of science you're in, exactly what skills are going to be the most important. You asked for non-technical skills, and I think that the important thing that happened to me actually was that I needed many more technical skills than I thought I did. A lot of programming, honestly, like basic software engineering, is really, really useful and important for prototyping things, for producing things, regardless of your scientific discipline. That so much of any kind of science is massive data processing, doing some interaction with other humans, so creating some kind of UI, some kind of application, and that all of those things come down to software engineering. And the better software engineer you are, the faster that you can prototype things. And I was reading a book by this science fiction author, Ursula Le Guin, who I really liked, and I've liked since I was a kid. It was like a kind of autobiography memoir, and she was saying that it's important to understand how to write sentences that sound good, that like those basic, very low-level things about writing are really important to being able to write a really long novel. That kind of craft of understanding how to put together a sentence enables the bigger art of narrative storytelling. And I think that that's also true of science today, that the craft of software engineering and software development enables great scientific discovery. And so the thing that made my startup possible, the thing that made it possible for me to build the systems in my PhD that later led to me getting a postdoc, that all of those things came down to software engineering. And I didn't become a software engineer on purpose either. That was not the career that I wanted. That definitely wasn't the career that I wanted when I started grad school. I thought of myself as a scientist and, learning fundamental truths and exploring mathematics. And I failed my qualification exams my first year as a PhD student in computer science. I failed them really badly. And so I had to take remedial, it was remedial for me. I had to take undergraduate, I had to take the accelerated track of undergraduate software engineering at Brown. And it was really difficult. And then I had to take another very intensive software engineering exam. When I was at Brown, the exam was a 4-day programming exam where you had to do something like build Twitter or build Google Maps, make it happen, 4 days, go. And do a version of it. And that was really grueling, but it made me enough of a better software engineer that it enabled the rest of my career. And I am not naturally a good software engineer. Very few things about software engineering make me really excited or interested, but it makes everything possible. So yeah, so you were asking for, I think a non-scientific thing that I would say is the most important thing is software engineering skills. So for myself, for my younger self, I would recommend building better software, reading about how to build better software, work on writing all of my software in a better way, and pushing myself to really write better software is a way to elevate, your later career and your ambition.
Yeah, no, I really like the one point you made really stick into me was the learning the craft, and which is something I really appreciate, because I have been reading a lot of blogs recently, and at least one of the blogs, I'm bad at recalling memories, but I don't know where I read this from, but I guess it was like I was trying to learn like what essentially contributes to a good PhD, because eventually you will work on projects, you will have publications, but what calls for a good PhD versus a bad PhD? And one thing that I learned was research is all about creativity, because you learn the implementations one way or the other, either you're in industry or in research, but it's all about how you apply it creatively. So I guess the one thing that really stick to me was the craft. So I'll definitely check out that book that you suggested. And to look back, definitely one thing that I think a takeaway from your answer would be implementation. That was something that you really become good at, and you became so good at that you went ahead to be a co-founder for a startup, which I guess I'll be asking more on those things later on. But while we are on the same note, can you speak to more about any of the drawbacks that you feel PhD had on you overall? I mean, I know this might be a personal question, so feel free to choose what you answer or not answer, but do you think that PhD had any drawbacks for you?
So it's been long enough now since I graduated. It's been 4 years since I graduated, that I think like the real pain of it is like in my memory. But I know that when it happened, it was quite difficult for me to not pass my first qualification exam. That was hard. I don't know, it really bruised my ego and my image of myself. And self-direction is really hard. That my advisor gave me great high-level direction and introduced me to very interesting topic areas and helped me get internships that really built my career. But trying to decide what is a research schedule, like coming up with my own thesis, and this was so I also did faculty search before I decided to do a startup, and I think that this is what makes the difference between a good faculty candidate and a bad faculty candidate. And I was a very medium faculty candidate, so I would not pretend like I have a great answer to this. But having a vision, like a schedule for what your I don't know, passion, that sounds too kind of a weak way of saying it, but you're the captain of a ship, and what direction is your ship going in? What is your research plan? What is your vision? What is the coherent narrative of the projects that you're working on? How do they fit together? It's extremely hard to do that. And I found it very difficult to do that as a PhD. But as far as like personal experiences in doing a PhD, it was not bad for me at all. I really enjoyed it. And I had some ego bruising during the process, but for me personally, it was not bad at all. And I think the difference between a PhD and a industrial job, a difference that I have experienced from having one, from being a boss of some people now for a little while, and from advising undergraduates and younger than me graduate students, that I think your identity is really bound up in your PhD, and that's hard. For me, that was hard. That like who I am and how successful I am personally was so tied to my PhD. And that's not true necessarily when you have a job. Your job can suck, and that doesn't mean that you are bad in any way. But if you have a PhD and things are sucking at your PhD and your research, you feel really bad about it. And if I could do it again, that I would try to separate that more in my head and really realize that those things are not related. Like you don't have to have a good PhD to be extremely successful. You don't have to have a good paper. One of the most famous computer vision researchers, Jitendra Malek, who's a computer vision professor at Berkeley and probably the most prolific creator of other professors in computer vision or computer science, did not have a single publication when he got his job at Berkeley. He just had a pretty interesting thesis, and the other faculty liked him. This is also truth about all jobs, that like you just need a champion. You need some people who think that you're cool. And so I know that this sounds very bad, but that like so much of your PhD comes down to luck. Like, did you happen to, run into the right collaborators? It is, I think that if you put together craft, being very good at programming, really like having some mathematical background that's stable, having a pretty good software engineering abilities, and having some luck or having enough patience to wait for the luck to come to you, that is a lot of it. And if things are going bad outside of those two things, it's probably fine. Don't feel bad about it at all. That would be my advice to myself, that like the great ideas and the sparkly, like exciting moments and products that I made, I didn't need to feel as bad about myself when those weren't happening. Like I could have relaxed a little bit and just waited for the good things to come. Yeah.
I didn't know the statistics about the Jitendra Malek profile.
Yeah.
It's definitely very encouraging. I mean, definitely I shouldn't be undermining him by his work back then, but definitely it feels encouraging.